Hello, welcome to Bookworms. I'm your host, Alex,
And I'm Joe.
and this is the show where we read a book and then we sit down together and we talk about the book that we just read.
And this is a bonus episode.
It's bonus Bookworms, you lucky
Yeah,
devils.
yeah, and we got a bonus person here today. Someone new. Why don't you say hello?
Hello.
That is Adam for you, everyone. He's the one that suggested this book.
It's a real piece of work.
Yeah, he gave us a real run for our money here.
And he didn't even read the book, did
No, he didn't read the book.
I do not want to be on this podcast right now. So I'm not going to say very much.
he? Just give it an hour. You'll definitely want to be on this podcast.
We'll edit all that out. So yeah, Adam, what book did you pick for us?
Well, Joe, I picked Hopscotch. I have no idea what this book is about.
Ooh, you should read the back for us.
No, I'm not reading the back, Alex. I don't know. Someone from Argentina. Julio from Argentina. How do you say his last name? Assistance, please. You stop laughing.
It's Hopscotch by Julio Cortazar.
Yeah, Cortazar. That's it. So, about this book, I truly have no idea what it's about. I was out drinking in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and they have this lovely establishment called the Book Bar, and it is exactly as it sounds, a bar where you can buy books. So I think that's where I came across this book. Again, I have no idea what it's about, so I thought it would be a good thing for my friends here at Bookworms to review without me. But they insisted that I be part of this. So I still haven't read the book, so they're just going to talk about it, and I'll chime in every now and then.
And that's Adam.
So, Adam, what about this book made you think this would be a worthwhile one to discuss? Watch out for the boom arm there.
Well, Alex, I was drunk, and I know a lot of these books exist, but for some reason at the time I thought it was a very novel idea that you can
Ba-dum-bum.
read it different ways. Yeah, that was also fun. But yeah, I mean, tons of these books exist. It is a very common style book where you can read in different orders. But yeah, I was drinking, so I bought it, and now you guys are going to talk about it.
So this book has multiple ways to read it, as Adam mentioned. There is the straight through version, which is the way I read it, which meant I had to read 200 less pages than Alex.
Yeah, the way I read it, the book's divided into three sections, and the third section, if you read the book from first page to last, you can skip the last section, which is 200 pages and just under 100 chapters of the book. If you read it the way I read it, you don't read it straight through. You bounce between the linear story and all these extra chapters that add extra nuance and plot points and a whole bunch of other knickknacks and doodads to go with the story.
And what we're going to do is try to figure out how much more Alex got out of the story than I did. And then we'll both compare to what we got out of it compared to Adam.
Again, I did not read this book. This was not my intention to be on this podcast.
Oh, we're damn glad you're here. We read it for you. You can at least sit there and squirm.
And for the listeners, we read it for you also. So that's why this is a bonus and not just part of the normal podcast feed.
If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't have read this book.
Me either.
So how about you guys read the back of the book for everyone?
Ready? Same time. Go. You don't even have the book in your hand. Here, I got it.
Okay. I struggle on his last name anyways. I just referred to him as Ollie whenever I came across it.
Yeah, I butcher a lot of these character names.
I shorten pretty much all of them.
Horatio Oliveira is an Argentinian writer who lives in Paris with his mistress La Maga, surrounded by a loose-knit circle of bohemian friends who call themselves the Club. A child's death and La Maga's disappearance put an end to his life of empty pleasures and intellectual acrobatics and prompt Oliveira to return to Buenos Aires, where he works by turns as a salesman, a keeper of a circus cat which can truly count, and an attendant in an insane asylum. Hopscotch is the dazzling, freewheeling account of Oliveira's astonishing adventures.
I have a problem with the ending, when the guy that owned the circus decides to sell the circus to buy a sane asylum. I mean, who does that, really?
Yeah, that guy was wearing plot armor. Well, where to begin? Because we begin on different chapters entirely. Joe begins,
On chapter 1.
which you would expect a novel to begin usually, is chapter 1. I, however, began on chapter 73.
So why don't we start on chapter 73, since I have no clue what you just read.
Would you guys mind just unpacking the back of the book a bit? Because I'm still totally confused what this book is about.
Yeah, I think a chapter by chapter breakdown is going to take a while because Joe read 56 chapters and I read 155 chapters. Actually, no, that's not true. I read 154 because there's one chapter I didn't read because I didn't have to. But I did have to read one chapter twice, so that was a thing.
If you read it the Hopscotch way, the end of the book loops, and it just kind of goes on in perpetuality. So Alex is still technically reading this book right now as we speak.
Yes, I'll forever be bouncing between chapters 58 and 131.
Yeah. So let's start on chapter 73, though. How does it start for you?
So this is more like it doesn't introduce any characters really. It's just more of a philosophical thing to set up basically a theme in the novel, which is the human mind gives things meaning, and without the human mind everything is meaningless essentially. And he talks about like how this little parable about a guy who sat on the street and looked at just a random screw that was in the road, and he stared at it for a long time, and like he became like a fixture of the town. And when he passed away, the screw that he stared at went into a museum. So what's normally just like a piece of trash or a discarded piece of equipment gained some level of significance because we as a human race gave it that significance. And that was the general theme of the book, or the theme of that introductory chapter, to kind of set things up. So it kind of gives you a scope of how to look at things that happen throughout the story.
And how did chapter 1 start, Alex?
Well, you read chapter 1, you should know.
Well, you read it too.
So I thought chapter 1 was pretty good because it gives us an immediate quest. I think it's essentially Oliveira writing something down in first person, I would say, because the first two chapters in the chapters 1 and 2 are in the first person, and the rest of the book is in third person, which pretty cool. But he immediately gives himself a quest with the opening sentence of "Would I find La Maga?" So he's immediately searching for someone or something named La Maga.
Do you know what La Maga means in English, if you translated it?
Yeah,
Did you look that up?
I did not look it up.
Okay, because I did this morning. I did. And it means the wizard or the magician. Because I kind of read it as, because La Maga is his female interest through most of the story. And, I took it as more as the horror, or the but I guess you can almost put her that way even as the magician.
Yeah, she's
because of
kind
her
of got
sexual prowess.
Yeah, she's got kind of a spell over a lot of the characters she interacts with due to her great beauty. Let's instead of going chapter by chapter, let's break it down. Let's talk about some of the characters.
Well, I just want to see the difference between the how you started versus how I started.
Okay.
I did have one comment in the beginning of the book that says, "I hate you, Adam." Because again, like Alex said, this book starts off very beautiful prose, but it's almost like a stream of consciousness, and I started having flashbacks of Finnegan's Wake and trying to get through that behemoth. All I can remember is just reading words on a page that kind of strung together semi-meaningfully, though I couldn't get any meaning out of that book. I suggest you read that one, Adam, and then you can discuss it with us.
As penance for making us read this book, you should read Finnegan's Wake.
But yeah, so let's talk about Horatio, since he's our main protagonist. Through this book, I always had difficulty remembering his age because all the people in this book, well, except for the women, we don't really get ages on them, but we assume they're a little bit younger just with the way they are treated. But Horatio is a 40-something-year-old, between 40 and 45, but he acts like a grad student.
Yeah, he acts like a guy in like his early 20s. He's out of school, but he hasn't really like found himself yet. By found himself, I mean like gotten a job. So he just like hangs out in pubs, drinking IPAs and talking about the philosophy textbooks he used to read back in his glory days in college.
Yeah, and him and all of his little friends try to out-compete each other in wit and knowledge and making obscure references that no one else gets and listening to obscure music that no one else listens to.
And Horatio's dating La Maga, and she's like part of that club just by the fact that she's close to him, and they treat her like absolute garbage.
Yeah, they treat all the women in this kind of shitty, especially Horatio. But they just call him stupid and whorish and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's like they can't get enough of the women because, oh my goodness, us geeks have attention of the female.
Yeah, for some reason, like I don't know if Horatio is supposed to be like this author insert or something like that, but he's just this absolute like. If I was at a party with him and he started talking to me, I would want to leave that party immediately. But
I really want to just punch him in the face.
Yeah, for some reason, like every woman in this book is like madly in love with him.
Yeah, and the women aren't as stupid as they're made out to be.
Yeah, it's a lot of like the women are clever, they're very intelligent, well-rounded characters, but like the male characters treat them like I don't know, they're commodities essentially. Especially La Maga. So it's established early on La Maga is very in love with Horatio, and Horatio does not reciprocate that. Oh,
Well, he does and he doesn't. Whenever he's around her, he wants nothing to do with her. But as soon as she's not in sight, he obsesses over her, and it gets kind of, disgusting with just how much puppy love he has for her when she's not around.
Yeah, and that was one of the extra chapters. Also, it was like building off of two previous chapters where it's talking about why he doesn't love her, and then there's like a extra chapter where he like goes just like really direct into why he doesn't love her, and it's because he doesn't feel that like overwhelming urge, that the overwhelming desire to always be with this person. So like I don't know, I read that and I made a note like he doesn't really know what love is.
Nope. So that's Horatio. You have La Maga, the beauty.
Adam's running away. He's getting a beer.
Always screwing things up.
There will forever be a soundbite of you closing a door. All right, we're back.
So yeah, La Maga. Let's talk about her a little bit, since she is the focal point of Horatio's thoughts.
She's like his muse.
His muse, if he actually did anything.
Yeah, he I don't know if he writes very much, actually. He just works as a writer, but never really describes him writing things. It talks about him hanging out with his buddies, arguing philosophy a lot.
But yeah, she has a child that he does not like. Oh, what's the child's name?
Rakumador.
Rakumador.
Yeah,
I called him Rack.
Yeah. So there's already like tension between Horatio and La Maga, who's we only get her real name a few times. Her real name is Lucia. There's some tension between them because for a number of reasons. Number one is there's some unrequited love there, unrequited feelings or unexplored feelings between the two. They have a friend named Gregorovius who's madly in love with La Maga, but La Maga doesn't love him, so they got a bit of a love triangle going.
And Horatio is completely jealous of her attention to him, even though it's just as friends.
Yeah, he's like really jealous and possessive of her. It's kind of sad. And then also she has to take care of her infant son Rakumador, who during the course of the novel takes sick, and she has to like give him her full attention, which Horatio is also made extremely jealous by.
Yeah, those toddlers, man, they just steal your women away.
I wouldn't know. I don't have kids.
I have two.
Adam gets it.
Yeah.
I don't have my own microphone, so I'm just kind of sitting here.
I think we should isolate everything Adam says and just release that as the podcast.
That works.
So I guess I don't know if you want to just like
Let's whiz through a couple more of the characters from the
Okay.
club. Say we have Gregor. All these people come from money, so they don't need to work, or if they do work, it's menial jobs where they don't do very much and have lots of time to read and listen to music and drink and just hang out with each other. They live in cruddy apartments or in bad parts of town in Paris. They have who's a couple other people in the group there, Alex?
we have
Wong.
Wong, Etienne, and then is it Raymond and Babs?
Yeah, Babs.
Babs might be the only female character that Horatio does not try to sleep with.
Yeah, that's only because she never leaves her boyfriend's side.
Really, like I didn't get much out of Wong, Babs, Raymond, or Etienne.
No, they're just kind of there.
Gregorovius is really the most important one, which in chapter 65 they really get into his character. They do a full like club. It's called sample entry from club files, and they just his favorite kinds of dress, his favorite foods, where he's from, and things like that. And then it devolves into his backstory of calling his mother a whore for like a page and a half. Then it starts going into that love triangle when you get back into the main narrative.
Horatio's thoughts on Gregor Barris.
Yeah, which Gregorovius, he's like this like sweetheart, like bleeding heart guy, but also when he gets faced with actual problems and stuff, he caves as well. As everyone else does.
And then who's the mistress? Because in my version, she just kind of gets mentioned, and it's very just where did this come from?
Yeah, so Horatio also has a side piece named Pola, who he sees in addition to Lamaga, it's all like an open relationship. They all know about each other. One thing that the extra chapters kind of flesh out is that Horatio dumps Pola, and right around the time that she gets diagnosed with cancer, so there's this whole debate of whether he dumped her because she had cancer.
Yeah, and then you get a bit where Lamaga's talking about how she had made a voodoo doll, essentially, and put pins in the breasts, and Horatio stomped on the doll and pushed the pins all the way in, and that's what killed her, but it was never quite clear if she actually died from the breast cancer.
Yeah, it just has her getting left.
Yeah, a lot of stuff that just kind of gets left out, where you're just led to wonder, and a lot of unreliable narratives going around. So let's get into
the second sentence from the back of the book. A child's death and Lamaga's disappearance put an end to his life of empty pleasures and intellectual acrobatics.
Yeah, so we're going to get into the main stick of the part one here of what breaks up the club and sends Horatio running.
So, Lamaga's son Rakumador is sick. This leads to tension between Horatio and Lamaga because Horatio doesn't want Rakumador there. He wants Lamaga out to himself.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Is Horatio the father of this raccoon character?
Oh, God. He is not.
No, and he didn't even know about this child when he first started dating Lamaga because Lamaga it was kind of unclear if she gave it up or put the child into a boarding school of sorts where she did not have to care for the child until the child became sick. She just had weekend visits, and then so the child became sick and they kicked the kid out, and she had to get him better before he could go back, which she did not do.
Yeah, so Rakumador is sick, and he gets progressively sick throughout the first half of the book. And the sicker he gets, the more time Lamaga spends. It leads to somewhat of a separation between Horatio and her.
Horatio basically says, "Me or the kid," and then he leaves. And at the same time, he's accusing her of having an affair with Gregor Varus.
Yeah, so he returns to the apartment, and this is where a lot of the action happens in the story. It's like the huge kind of catalyst that breaks them all up. So Gregorovius is hanging out with Lamaga in the apartment, and the kid is sick. They get the kid to go to sleep. Horatio comes back. He sees Lamaga and Gregorovius talking. He assumes they've just slept together.
Because he just assumes that for everything.
Yeah.
He thinks with his dick more than his head.
It's a good way of putting it. And then, so they're just kind of sitting around chatting a little bit. The whole time there's a neighbor who's like stomping on the floor above them, kind of creating a lot of noise and kind of adds to the chaos of the whole thing. And
they got music playing.
Yeah.
They're all smoking.
Yeah, and Horatio, he like gets up and he's like getting a drink or something, and he walks by the sleeping kid. He like touches his head and he realizes the kid has died.
But instead of saying, "Hey, the kid just died. We need to do something," he goes back to his seat and
he carries on the conversation that they're having, like nothing's happened.
And then the next time they can get.
Yeah, he sends Lamaga up to deal with the guy who's stomping on the floor, and he shows Gregorovius, who's madly in love with Lamaga, the only person who calls her by her real name in the book. He shows him the dead kid, and he also does not tell her that the kid has died.
They just go back, and then a bunch of their friends from the club show up, and they slowly pass the word around to all of them, while Lamaga just sits completely oblivious until she has to wake the kid up to give him his medicine. Then as soon as she does that, everyone flees except for Babs.
Yeah, once she finds out the kid has died, yeah, everyone gets up and leaves.
So was this the same for both of you?
Yes.
This is just how the story starts?
This is what's chapter 28? Like for me, it was probably about a quarter of the way through the book. For you, it's probably about the halfway point.
Third half, yeah.
And this, for my end, this is the longest break from the main narrative that there is, because after that whole scene happens, there's about 12 chapters in the extra chapter section where Horatio does a lot of introspective stuff. He gets into his relationship with Pola. There's a writer he admires that's only mentioned a couple times in the main narrative called Morelli, where there's a section where he meets Morelli and he organizes his paperwork for him. And there's another thing where he's like talking to his friend Etienne about a dream he had about bread, which I couldn't even begin to unpack, but that's okay. I wish I had more time to look into why is he dreaming about bread all the time. But then it comes back, and when it comes back, Lamaga has disappeared. There's been a wake and a funeral for the kid.
Yeah, Horatio just disappeared himself and had been avoiding her the whole time. So he kind of comes, the rest of the club had stuck around at least for the funeral and Gregorovius helped Lamaga leave, and she gave him Horatio's apartment for helping her. And she just kind of disappears, and no one knows what happened to her. There's rumors of her committing suicide, of going to a couple of different cities and different countries, and Horatio goes kind of crazy looking for her.
Yeah, he starts showing signs of some mental instability. He makes a really poor decision with a homeless woman. You said that was one of your favorite parts.
As well. So there's two different scenes. The scene before the baby dies, where he's walking around with a crazied pianist who he tries to sleep with half-heartedly, and she freaks out, and because they had been roaming around in the rain of Paris.
I read that as it was like a misunderstanding between the two, and like he didn't want to sleep with her. He was just asking her if she wanted him to come up to her apartment.
I took it as he's disgusted by the thought, but at the same time he wants to do it just because he's feeling something, and he's been going so long without feeling anything, and he's like, you know what, it's going to be disgusting and wrong and gross, but if she opens up, I'll take that advantage. And then he innocently tells her, yeah, we can go up to your place and have some wine or whatever, and she freaks out thinking that he's actually making an attempt on her, or no, he wanted to take her to a hotel, and she starts beating him, saying,
she slaps him.
Yeah, slaps the shit out of him.
And he runs away crying.
Yeah,
like a real man.
But then after he comes back to find Lamaga gone, he goes on a bender with cheap wine, finds a homeless prostitute,
goes across the street from him.
Yeah, gives her bottles and bottles of wine until they're both completely sloshed, and then to repay him for the wine, she gives him a blowjob until the cops show up and arrest them all. And that's basically, for me, the end of part 1.
Yep, that's the same as part 1 for me. The last chapter feeds into the first chapter of part 2, where we get a whole new setting and a whole new cast of characters.
Quick question. I thought it was the homeless person that he wanted to bring up to the hotel room. Was it someone else?
Yeah. So he's talking about two different scenes. So when he so I think my order might be different than yours, but so when he meets the pianist lady, that's before he goes back to the hotel and or goes back to his room and finds the kid dead.
That's correct.
And then the homeless lady is after Lamagas disappeared, and he's gone on his bender, and he's just hanging out with the homeless lady across the street from him, and then they go to have some oral sex, and
Some little fellatio.
and then they are rudely interrupted.
Yep.
But that kind of inspires him to return to his homeland of Argentina.
Yeah, it sounds like he was getting cut off. Basically, his brother, it sounded like, was supporting him. That's what I kind of gathered from it. He had a bit where he's this weird chapter where he's writing to Lamaga, supposedly, where he was in Spain for a while before he went back to Argentina. It was a weird chapter. That was a tough one to get through. It was every other line was there's two different stories going on, and you had to read every other line to get one story, and then go to the opposite lines to get the other story. It was very tough to understand what was going on.
Yeah, this book's not an easy read. I don't know if you know that.
No. But yeah, so he goes back to Argentina, and he immediately runs into his childhood friend,
Traveler,
or as I called him, Trav, because he's a four-letter kind of guy.
So this is part 2 of the story?
Yeah, we're into part 2.
We're into
part 2.
Okay, so just for part 1, all that really happened is, what's her name? Lamaga. She has an infant son who died, and Hiroshio doesn't really like her, but she loves him, and that's about it, right?
Yeah, and like
a lot of words to describe very little.
Yeah, and there's a lot of character interaction, a lot of philosophical debate between all the characters, and it's kind of funny. Like there's hundreds of pages leading up to this event, and they've had all these big talks about all these lofty ideals and things like that, and then just real life just comes in and like shatters all those ideals.
Yeah, again, you're reading this and you're picturing a bunch of post-grads, grads, and undergrads in philosophy who are some cross between socialists, communists, anarchists, and just perpetual students, all debating philosophy. But then you get reminded, no, these are 40-year-olds that have never grown up, which just kind of makes it all kind of the more pathetic. But yeah, so we meet Traveler and Talita, Traveler's wife, who kind of, sort of, not really looks like Lamaga.
She has a strong resemblance to her.
But at the same time, she doesn't, as he keeps pointing out. It's more him imposing Lamaga's image on her.
Yeah. So early on, after his return, like he's hanging out with his friends, he's kind of living with them. He's also got a new girlfriend, Gekreptin.
Yeah. Who was the other woman, Senora? Like it was close. Their names are similar. It almost seemed like he was sleeping with her too, occasionally.
He probably was.
But yeah, he immediately starts bumming off this other woman for a place to live. Well, he's not really working. He tries to make it as a salesman selling clothing, or not clothing, cloth, high-end cloth that doesn't really go anywhere. His buddy Traveler, who works for the circus, ends up getting him a job as the keeper of a cat that can count.
Yeah, and it's kind of a quirky little thing. I didn't really get much out of the counting cat.
No, it was just kind of one of those weird things that we need something weird, so here's something weird. What I didn't get was, Traveler's a lot like Horatio, and they talk about a lot of how they're kind of doppelgangers in their attitudes, but one's gone crazy, one's become stable and trying to provide for his wife. But what I thought was kind of hilarious, or not hilarious, but just strange, is Talita is a pharmacist, but she left her job because Traveler wanted to be in the circus, and it's like they're struggling financially constantly, even though she had a career where they could have been living fairly comfortably.
That is hilarious.
It's just, it's like, again, one of those things where they couldn't handle the woman making more than the guy, so he forced her to take a different job.
Yeah, gender roles definitely play a lot into this story.
I mean, once they go into the insane asylum and she becomes the pharmacist there, and everyone's commenting, yeah, she's like alive again, where she's actually having to use her head and she's happy all of a sudden. How could that be? And it's just like, well, because you had her minding a cat versus actually doing the thing that she went to school for.
Yeah, she starts to flourish.
Can we step back a minute and
Sure.
talk about the
I'd love to.
counting cat?
Yeah.
What was the point of the counting cat?
It was a circus attraction that Horatio was in charge of.
Toledo was in charge of it, and then when they got Horatio the job, he took charge, and Toledo became the accountant for the circus.
The fact that it's mentioned in the back of the book kind of does the book a disservice.
How exactly does the cat count?
They have cards, and on the backs of the cards they put essentially catnip on the cards so that the cat looks like it can count.
Yeah, it's just a circus act. Smoking mirrors.
I guess the cat got lucky initially and actually could count, or look like it was counting, and then they brought it to the circus and showed it, and then they expanded on it and made it so that the cat would not fail. And then the guy that owns the circus decides to sell the circus, and the guy who buys the circus is just tickled pink by this cat, and he takes the cat. And Horatio's like its bodyguard, where it's not supposed to be out of eyesight ever, and you see they're afraid they're going to lose the cat.
Did you ever talk about a plot device? He sells his circus so that he can buy an insane asylum.
He's only really referred to as Boss Man. I think he does have a name, but I don't remember what it is.
I could probably find it at some point, but I'm not gonna.
Boss Man works.
Boss Man works.
Should the insane asylum not be on the back as well?
No, the insane asylum actually winds up being very important. Because throughout this entire time that they're in Argentina, Horatio is slowly going insane. He's doing crazy things like trying to straighten out bent nails.
Just because they're there. And he tries to get Toledo to cross. They live in different buildings on opposite ends of a street, and they try to get her to cross the space by sticking two boards out from each window, and her just trying to walk across them or crawl across them, almost killing her in the process when they realize that the boards are not strong enough to hold her weight.
Yeah, so especially after they get the insane asylum, Horatio starts getting very erratic in his behavior. So yeah, he starts the minor things like that, but then he's also more often mistaking Toledo for La Maga. He's
obsessing over the hopscotch pattern beneath his window, and whenever Toledo walks by it after she's closing up the pharmacy, he thinks it's La Maga that's going across the hopscotch, and he ends up kissing Toledo.
Yeah, and this whole time, like, he's smoking and drinking way and way more throughout, and that's impacting him. And it all kind of culminates with him having this rivalry with Traveler, because, like, they've been described as being so similar.
But he wants to take Toledo because he actually sort of respects her, because she doesn't put up with his bullshit and calls him out on it. And she's whip smart, and even though he still tries to claim that she's not as bright as any guy could be, but she definitely has him beat in most of his games that he comes up with. And Toledo, for her part, gets kind of confused. Like, she sees this guy who's throwing all this interest her way, where she's been with Traveler, who just kind of accepts her, just kind of there as part of the scenery, and so she's confused. And then when Horatio finally does kiss her, she freaks out, runs back to Traveler and says, "Hey, this just happened."
And that kind of triggers Horatio's big, full-on mental break. He, like, sets up his room in some sort of, like, Home Alone-style booby traps. And then he tries to fight Traveler because he calls Traveler his doppelganger. And, like, he's trying to replace him.
Yeah, and then he threatens to throw himself out the third-story window and kill himself.
Yeah.
So I thought, everyone's freaking out over this, and I'm like, third-story window, he ain't going to die. He's just going to break a bone, maybe.
And your version ends with him kind of
on that ledge.
Yeah, he's on the ledge. He's claiming that, like, he doesn't really have control over his actions right now, but then he kind of, like, his final thought as the book ends is like, maybe I do, and maybe I should choose to jump. But then the story for me continues on from there for another bunch of chapters where some of the Yeah, forever. For some, it's actually some of the shorter chapters. Just kind of quickly wraps up some people's storylines, and some people's storylines go on forever. Where we find out Horatio does not jump. He does, however, wind up in a state of constant delirium, where he's kind of just completely lost his mind.
So he's in the pink jumpsuit by the end?
Yeah, and Talita and Traveler are kind of like his caretakers in the insane asylum, watching after him.
So yeah, that's Hopscotch in a nutshell.
Does it make you want to read it, or do we just spoil it all for you?
No, it actually sounds quite terrible. Did it differ at all between the two ways of reading it?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Why was yours just longer and Joe's just kind of ended?
So, well, yeah, mine was 200 pages longer.
He got a lot of background information that I was just left hanging with. Pola, where she just appeared and disappeared for me. Alex got a little backstory. Gregororis, he gets a whole dossier on him.
Yeah, we meet, especially Pola and Morelli. We meet those two new characters that don't really exist in the main book outside of a couple of references. We get a more definite ending. We get a different beginning, and then it's also just a ton of extra philosophical debates. We get actual, like, more direct opinions and perspectives from Horatio. It adds a whole lot. There's like quotes from other like famous pieces of literature that he goes with that tie in with the story.
Yeah, there's a lot of references in this book, and for someone like me who dabbles in this sort of stuff, I got some, missed a lot. Alex, I'm sure, got a lot more out of it than I did.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I got through part 1, and I saw how much I had left, and recording day was coming up.
So I am a slave driver.
Yeah,
with
I did
whip
try and I did end up kind of speed reading part 2, but I don't know. If we want to get into our opinions of the book, I feel like kind of with as Adam described it, like, all right, so kid dies, goes to Argentina, goes crazy. And I'm like, yep, that all happens in 564 pages. So the story's, like, as the Hopscotch version, is really bloated, and it's cool, it's unique. It's not like a huge amount of books that are like this. It's the first book I've really ever read that it has two different ways to read it, like physically read it. I mean, there's different ways you can always analyze text and look at things, but like changing it up like that, it's very unique. But holy crap, that was a long ass book for what it was.
Yeah, I thought this was a well crafted book. It was the translation Alex had pointed out to me when we were discussing it when we were both done with part 1, and usually translations of books can come out kind of clunky. You lose a lot, but this was...
Yeah, it's one of the better translated texts I've read.
Yeah, this felt like it was well crafted in the translation to still have that same flow that the original story probably has in its original language. But this isn't the kind of book that I would normally read. While it's probably good that I read these books occasionally, it wasn't my cup of tea. It was just a lot of whining, a lot of despicable characters. I haven't read any Nietzsche or Dostoevsky, but I listen to a lot of podcasts where they talk about those two authors and philosophers and their writing, and this felt like it was something like out of their kind of realm, where you got a lot of heavy dialogue, a lot of heavy philosophy, but not a whole lot's happening. A lot of love interests that the protagonists seem to be unable to attract. Usually love interests that are for someone else.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to relate it to one of those books, like Crime and Punishment is similar in a lot of ways, where there's a lot of nothing going on except for philosophical debates, and then something happens and it causes a complete shakeup in a guy's psyche. I think Crime and Punishment is a way better book than this one, because there's a lot of... he completely changes the way he thinks after he kills somebody, essentially. And
the guy just goes crazy.
Yeah, this guy goes crazy.
And so, he didn't even do the killing.
I think that's the biggest problem with this book, is like there's no redemption, there's no rethinking things. It's just kind of straight up, he gets punished because like he almost goes crazy for no particular reason. Maybe you can say it's his guilt over the way he treated La Maga or the way he's been running his life for the first half of it.
I think it was more of a coming to age. He realizes that this kid just died, that he screwed up royally, and he can't handle the fact that he needs to be an adult. He's a 40-year-old man-child, and he's realizing that, hey, I need to work for a living. I can't just sit around drinking and smoking all day talking philosophy with friends. I gotta actually do something with my life, and that's what sends him over the edge. That's kind of my thoughts on it. I got some questions here if we want to try to answer them.
Sure. Do you have any more questions, Adam?
So aside from being able to read the book different ways, what do you think of the title? Is there some analogy to what he saw on the street with the hopscotch and seeing the maga?
So hopscotch is kind of a double entendre in the book because the way you physically read the book is described as hopscotching, so that jumping back and forth, and also the like hopscotch is kind of, I would say it's like almost a metaphor for Olivier's mind because his mind starts making those jumps, those leaps of logic, and like it gets a little more philosophical, I guess, but it's like him losing his mind and also him trying to balance all of his philosophical ideas throughout the novel is like a game of hopscotch, just trying to jump back and forth and trying to maintain it without falling off balance.
Yeah, at times it felt like a little bit of a stretch. He was pushing the hopscotch a little too hard towards the end, I thought. But yeah, it basically what Alex said. So I got these questions from WordPress.com, the Voyage Out book group.
Oh, don't give them credit.
Too late. So, we basically answered the first question, the difference between the two ways of reading. So we'll skip over that one. But the characters in the novel talk to each other a lot. Subjects include, but are not limited to, philosophy, jazz, love, literature, and travel. These talks are either brilliant or pretentious, or both. Are we to take these discussions seriously, or how much of what Cortazar is showing us is satire? I'm going to leave this to you, Alex, because you're kind of the guru in this stuff.
I would say it's a lot of satire. I forget what chapter it was. It's one of the extra chapters where he's talking about love as an emotion and as a feeling, and then there's like one chapter where he just says like it's just a list of different metaphors for what love is, kind of like satirizing. Like there's like 2 chapters in a row about like, oh, I feel love and this is love for me, and then like that extra chapter is like love is a 4-letter word. Love is a feeling in your heart. Love is a battlefield. I don't know. I'm just making shit up, but it just kind of parodies that. So yeah, there's a lot of probably dark satire, kind of a send up of that kind of bohemian lifestyle. I don't know. I guess kind of like when we read Clockwork Orange. I would argue he didn't go big enough on that if he's going for a satirical edge, and I think he probably a lot of those philosophical studies that he puts in there were more like serious discussions, even though the people he created to have those discussions are all just pieces of crap.
I feel that the characters are the satire and the discussions are serious almost.
Yeah, because I mean they're confronted with something that shakes up their beliefs and they're unable to recover from it, essentially.
When the setting changes from France to Argentina, does the style or tone change as well? How does Horatio interact in Argentina as opposed to France? I mean, other than the mania, the manic state that he's kind of in, and even when he's quote unquote happy in Argentina, you can see it's more manic happiness. A high a low is about to slam into him, like a bipolar person.
And when he's in France, I mean, I wouldn't argue that he's entirely happy, but he's kind of in control of his life.
He's content.
Yeah, he's very content.
Content in his misery, I would say.
Whereas when he's in Argentina, yeah, he starts off happy, but he's also, I don't think he has anywhere to go. He's 45 and hasn't found himself yet, and it kind of wrecks him. So there's definitely a shift in tone where like a lot of what he's saying begins to lose any of its meaning, or people don't take as much value in what he's saying to people because they see the cracks starting to form.
How does structure guide plot in this book?
I was doing some like study on the different ways. The way I read it, it's more, I guess, structure over plot, whereas you might be more plot over structure on your version. So like the structure, I think the hopscotching back and forth, it was like it's really cool. I think it does change up the way the plot happens because, like I said, with the kid dying and then there's this huge break, whereas the kid dies and then it goes on to the next scene. So it changes up the way information is delivered, which is it's pretty neat.
This book never settles on one type of language. Does this imply a love of language in all forms or a distrust of language to show the variety of experience?
I think
Ava's
weighing in. Like it can be used in different ways. Like the language gets used. Sometimes it's like, like I'm speaking in French because it's his love language. Other times, like in chapter 28, when the kid dies, like they use untranslated French to cause some confusion to the reader and adds to the chaos of the thing. And I mean, there's lots of untranslated passages in the second half of the novel when Horatio's losing his mind. So,
yeah, they got
I think it's
Spanish or Portuguese or whatever they might be doing both. I don't know.
They use a lot of language to kind of confuse or show dissonance,
or just try to hide something. When they're trying to hide from another character who might not understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. You have anything else to say, Alex? That's my bit.
Yeah, check out Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Great book. This one, I thought about when I first started reading. I'm like, I'm going to try and read it both ways, but I think I'm good on just the hopscotch way. Interesting read, very unique. It's just not for me. I'm not a big philosophy guy. Congrats on a monumental achievement, but I'm going to watch from over here from now on.
Yeah, I said not my cup of tea, but if it's your cup of tea, go for it. Read it every way you possibly can. Adam, you have any last comments?
Let me guess. I really don't want to be on this podcast.
Aside from that, you guys did a great job. I probably won't read the book.
We can leave both our copies for
Judging
you.
from your feedback. Yeah, good job, guys.
What's the next book you're going to recommend and not read?
Well, my dad's going to be on here talking about the Bible. So that's going to be hilarious. I got some good books that I have read and I would recommend, but I just really don't want to be on a podcast.
Sounds like we got bonus episodes for forever now.
Yeah, Adam's going to be regular maybe.
Next up, we're reading Wool.
That book sucks. How did Hopscotch compare to the last book you read?
So the last book we read was Night Watch, right? So
yeah, that's not going to have aired.
Oh.
See, the last one that's going to have aired is going to probably be John Dies at the end.
Are you talking about Butcher and the Red?
Yeah. Oh, so yeah. So we're a little ahead of the game, Adam. Yeah, we recorded months.
Time is all relative.
I mean, the last book that is currently posted.
As of right now, we have currently posted Butcher and the Wren by Elena Urquhart, and the last one we recorded that was Night Watch by Terry Pratchett. So we're way ahead of the game. Like that was this month, and we're all the way up till November. But I would say this is better than that book because it's a little more believable.
Yeah, Butcher and the Wren was just a terrible book. Compared to Night Watch, I'll take Night Watch every day of the week. I'll read that one multiple times.
Yeah. Butcher and the Wren is laughably bad.
Yeah.
So this one is kind of.
Yeah, this is high literature. Butcher and the Wren is barely legible English.
Perfect. That's what I was looking for.
Put that under her books now.
Yeah. Okay, so if you want to email us, you can at kendallbookworms@gmail.com. We have a website that will be in the description below.
Let's reword that, Joe. It's not, if you want to email us, you can. What's that say? Email us at kendallbookworms.com.
Shut up.
10 reasons why you need to email us right now.
We have an Instagram at Kendall Bookworms. We have a website. It'll be in the description down below since I don't bother to learn what our website address actually is.
If you want to see what we look like if we were in the Barbie movie, go check it out.
Yeah, it is quite fantastic. So yeah, Alex, get us out of this.
This has been Hopscotch. I'm Alex.
And I'm Joe.
And you've been listening to
a bonus episode
of Bookworms.
I'm Adam.
And goodbye.